Thank you so much for joining in for this fireside chat. I don't think I will introduce the speakers. I think I'll let the speakers introduce by themselves because it's one of the most respected stories of the software engineering industry in the entire world, right? Right before this fireside chat, I was attending a stakeholders meeting in which people were saying that we should focus on exits more so that more and more angel investors will become interested in the ecosystem and it'll become like a cascading effect. But I've been looking at the Zoho story, and it was all about building a sustainable business, right? A business that will run over years, a value-driven business, something that will create a corporation like an IBM or a Microsoft in the longer term. I can clearly see that that is your vision. And I think there are three co-founders, if I read it right. That is Sreedharji and his brother, and then you, Tony. I think we have a good amount of exposure about Sreedharji. People must have seen his videos, his articles, and things like that. But we would like to hear first from Tony Thomas. In Sreedharji's his own words, he says that he's like my elder brother. I go to him for counsel. He's 2 years elder to me, and has been an anchor in this journey. So I would like to hear from you about what were you doing, how did you two meet, and the ups and downs of the Zoho story. It's not very easy to keep a co-founding partnership intact for 25 years. I mean, people have all kinds of egos, fights, etc. So if you could please give us a little bit of a brief about the history of Zoho. How did you guys meet? What was some of the interesting incidents that happened over years? That is what we would want to hear.
Actually, I'll introduce Tony because
Sure.
Tony never markets himself. So I have to market him because he is the quiet person who sits and writes code. So that's I always tell Tony, Tony, if you go and sell our software, it will never sell. I joke because he will undersell, right, as they say. So I have to actually market him. Tony almost single-handedly wrote our code. The first $10 million was code written by him. Almost 60-70% of the code was from him. The first $10 million of revenue, first 10 million, serious. That was back in 96, 97, all the way up to 2001. I actually was not the founding CEO, he was. In fact, I joined only about a year and a half later. And Tony actually asked me to become CEO in 99 because he said, you are the better salesman. So that is how I became CEO. So all this have to be told because, a lot of time Tony won't tell his own story. So that's why I have to say it. Now over to you, Tony.
All right, thank you. It's been a fun and interesting 25-year journey. Sreedhar and I both went to IIT Madras, but I didn't really know Sreedhar at the time. I did meet him once in New Jersey, but when I started, some mutual friend introduced me to Sreedhar.
So Rajiv, also Keralite.
Yeah, also
you remember?
Kerala, from Trivandrum, yeah.
We should bring him sometime.
Yeah, he's in Qualcomm now, but from Trivandrum. So he told me Sreedhar was also looking to do something, and so that's how we connected. And Sreedhar's brothers, in fact, were in Chennai, and I started working with them, and that's how the company got started. I won't go into the details of the technologies, but we've had a few different lines of business that we got into. So pretty early on, I realized, Sreedhar was a level above, a cut above, both in terms of business and technology. So somebody who could articulate the vision. I quickly, probably the smartest thing I did was tell him to be the CEO. So that definitely helped the company going forward. Sreedhar, in many ways, is the glue that holds the company together. Today, we are a company, of 12,000 people, and we have great leadership in the company now that runs independent divisions, that that does huge amounts of business around the world, and they pretty much run the businesses themselves now. So we certainly have to credit our success to the great team we were able to build. A few of them are here today as well, being from Kerala. So the team of people we have now is the key to success. But if you think about the early journey, it was not without its challenges, whether it is, the market challenges we have around finding good market. Sometimes you build a product that you think is a huge market, turns out to be a very small one, and you're struggling to make it a growth business. So Sreedhar's been very good about identifying gaps. He'd ask questions like, should we even be in this business? Most of us in technology, once you're in it, you just continue to work on and refine it and beat your head against the wall trying to break it. But Sreedhar is the kind of guy who would ask, should we even be doing this? Is there so ask the tough questions about the business and the strategy. Not just business, even technology. He would somehow get into, whether the technology, where the puck is going, as people say, and how should we be shifting our strategy. We often would question that. It was not without debate and argument and fights over things. People often, when they build something, are wedded to what they've done. Right? So that's one of the hardest things with founders, is that when you put so much effort into something, you find it very hard to change. So having somebody like this who questions your assumptions and pushes that has been very helpful throughout the year. So that's where Sreedhar's real impact on the company is today. Sreedhar likes to say, I don't write a line of code, so I don't build anything. But he provides the vision that we've had. So as a company, to just add a little more to the story of the company, we were in the telecom business selling to OEM vendors, and we quickly realized that you're beholden to a few customers. There are a few large customers that control you, and you end up having less room to grow in the market. So we switched our strategy. Sreedhar was driving this. It took a while for the company to accept the new vision, but that's when the company, I think, really took off. If you look at our products, the biggest division in the company is not the Zoho division that you hear about. It's something called Manage Engine. Right? That's really the IT tools business that we first got into, that Sreedhar was pushing us to get into. And that now is the biggest division in the company. The Zoho business is really the business applications division, applications like accounting and CRM, that we see as a huge growth opportunity. So I'll let Sreedhar add more color to the story.
Yeah, one of the things Tony mentioned, I'm the glue. Actually, Tony is the glue that often holds a lot of squabbling people in Zoho together. Because he's our Buddha. Call him the Buddha. I mean, I've never, in 27 years, I've never seen him get angry even once. So that's actually true, really. 27 years. So, in fact, I would sometimes, I say something provocative like, this is the suckiest quote I've seen to his face, and he will take it very peacefully. I tried to provoke him into an argument, but he has never argued. So that's his trait. I mean, he is a Buddha, right? And I remember back in 2003, I think Tony and a lot of our engineers had worked on a massive project. One day I announced we have to cancel it because there's no market. And we canned it. And Tony, very Buddha-like, accepted it. He could have fought back, It's original founder, all of that, but he said, okay, it's the right decision, we'll accept. So this is the kind of interaction we've had, and because I said there's no market here. This market is dying and we shouldn't be investing. So we moved our investment elsewhere. But it was a huge thing then. Half the company was working on this, and we had to can the whole thing.
Yeah.
I basically announced to the team, come back 2 days from now and we'll junk the code, entire code base. I still do it. I mean, I did it about 2 months ago to project. So sometimes this is the kind of things that I get to do. Company where I'm good at junking code. But people take it sportingly. That's the great thing about our company. And starting with Tony. Tony has been because he had worked 2 or 3 years on that project,
Right.
along with maybe 150 other engineers. But it was the fact that we could accept that, move on, and reinvent ourselves from those. That's the key. Because I always say, you are. It's not that we end up going the wrong way. We often do, but do we have the courage to make a U-turn? And oftentimes we stay on a wrong course even after realizing that we are on the wrong. Because we don't have the guts to say we'll make a U-turn. So I am very much a U-turn person in a lot of this.
So going back in years, I just wanted to find out how you two actually glued together. I'm told that you wrote your network management software. You took it to a few developer groups for opinions. And then eventually you wanted a partner who will be able to build on top of it. By that time, I think Kumarji had come and set up shop in Chennai. Was that more like an outsourcing partnership that started, or was it like, you wanted to develop that network management software, or had you already decided? Were you two different entities at one point of time which kind of converged into one? How did that story happen?
Yeah, so initially, when we first launched the product, we quickly needed help on, just keeping up with customer requests and demands and so on. And very quickly, I realized we have a great team here that we should make it one company. So within a year or two, we had created one entity across India and the US. And over time, the Indian entity was doing more and more, so we became a small arm in the US. It's a tail wagging the dog initially. But very quickly, the leadership of the product shifted, especially with our change in strategy. Even the product development direction, a lot of it was coming out of the leadership in India, with Sreedhar obviously giving a lot of vision and guidance to them.
So when was this official, incorporation in its current form, wherein you were the CEO and Sreedharji was also partner of in which year?
So that
I
would have
wasn't
been
involved for the first year. I wasn't there at all. 95 when you incorporated, right?
Yeah,
Right.
so started in 96.
95. 95
I
is
only
when,
got involved in 97.
97.
May.
Okay.
So
97.
I was at that time VP of Marketing and Business Development.
Right.
Tony was a CEO.
See.
So from 95 end to throughout 96, 97, Tony had built the product and there was some revenue coming in.
Right.
And he had already started working with my brothers in India at that time. I got involved only in May of 97.
Right. And then if I remember right, there was this .com bust that happened in US probably around 2000 time frames. And I'm assuming that you would have gone through a tough time at that period. So usually relations fall apart when you go through the toughest of the times. I mean, good relations last, but many relations go bust. What was your experience? I mean, because the reason why I'm asking you about this is, we are often told as startups that finding your right co-founder or the right partner to go with your journey is one of the key aspects, because otherwise it will be all on you. You're always alone at the top. So you need at least one person to share your agony with, right? But then we have also seen many people, that relation falling apart when you go through the toughest of the times because of philosophical differences and things like that. So around that, I'm assuming that 2000 would have been a tough time for the company. And what were some of the memories that you could actually take out and learnings that you took out of that engagement with your co-founder at that time, or co-founders at that time?
Yeah. So it's definitely a challenge I see many teams face. There's a honeymoon period where everybody's excited about the project, and after a while, people tend to drift apart and
Yes.
it gets harder. Within the company, we definitely had differences and disputes, even on strategy. It wasn't that, we had a smooth sailing throughout. And often the hardest is when you have geographically separated teams. So Sreedhar and I were in the US at the time, and I had already asked him to be CEO. So I wasn't in the mood to try to question his strategy. So he and I somehow, from the early days, seemed to have a good equation that, rarely wavered. I don't feel like we've had big disputes over the years. I'm not remembering anything too significant. Because we've been mostly aligned since we talk a lot.
That is good.
So that's definitely been real advantage for us. But when it came to working with people in India, it was not as simple because we don't see them as often. I used to visit often, Sreedhar used to visit even more often, but it's not quite the same as being together and getting in sync. So things drifted more between the teams, from the US and India. And those are the things you have to really watch for, I think, more than anything. But otherwise, it's, when you think about, co-founders working together, the model works well when there's a CEO that's given ownership as opposed to a second co-founder who is constantly second-guessing the CEO. I know that happens, right?
Yeah. I think that is one of the problems that we have all seen in the relationships wherein the full ownership of decision making sometimes is not transferred to the CEO. I keep telling people that we should have at least a 51% ownership for the founder so that one person makes a decision. I'm always against having this equal partnerships of 33.33% each kind. But so the network management business would have gone into a lull around 2000, and obviously then you decided to venture into another product development, right? How did that strategy came along? I mean, in terms of developing the editor, I forgot the name. Is it Zoho Edit or Zoho Writer?
Let's Sreedhar talk about it since he came up with the strategy.
Sure.
Yeah, so we had to, 2001 to 3, took 3 years to find our way back because we were in that optical communication bust. A lot of people actually, this is why I say these kinds of bubble and bust can be vicious. We have not experienced it in India, but we were in Silicon Valley. I'll give you a scale of this. We supplied about 300 plus startups in the optical networking space in 2000, okay? And maybe 99% of them vanished. 99% vanished. In fact, all of the promises of the optical revolution came true. As I like to say, in my remote village in Tenkasi district, I have a 300 megabit per second optical connection today. That is 20 years from those events. We actually have the optical connection. We have the 4G, now 5G is rolled out, broadband, everything is there. But the companies building that future were all dead. This is what bubbles do, by the way. It's very important to realize what financial bubbles do. And this has happened in railroad industry in the US. You study this again and again, you will see this pattern where Warren Buffett would say it. Just because the sector is going to have a long-term future, if there is an over-investment, too much investment flowing, it doesn't mean most companies will make it. That's absolute truth. I am afraid that some of this is going to repeat because we have just had massive amount of funding going into sectors without regard to profitability. 10 years, companies losing money is not normal. 10 years, 15 years of consistent losing money is not normal. That is what happened. And we were in the eye of that storm where 90% of our business was coming from these companies and 99% of those companies were going to go away. And we had to figure this out. This is where a lot of internal, in other words, the question is it going to come back or should we seek another market? These were the primary dispute at that time. Back in 2001, I declared this sector is going to die and it's not going to come back. Not because optical communication is dead. It is that supplying that is not going to be a viable market.
So if I may intervene, did he have a difference of opinion at that time? Or that is because I know that you were passionate about the network management that you built and then eventually it became a company. And one point of time, Sreedharji comes and says that let's scrap this and get into a totally new business. Did you have any reservations, difference of opinions at that time? Or you just, like he mentioned you had a Buddhist Zen feel about this whole thing?
No, I have to say, I was spending a lot of time with Sreedhar, and he can be pretty persuasive. So at some level, he had convinced me The harder part was convincing the leadership in India, which by that time had taken over the products and were really developing them. And so it was not without a lot of dissent in the company, and it took a while to do this. So Sreedhar had to fight a lot of battles to get, changing the direction of a company is not easy. One of the hardest things you can do, especially if the company is making money and profitable. Making a change is very hard, right? So in that
I
sense,
pretty much declared that our current business is going to die. It's dead and no point in further investing in it. But we were making money in it. That's a very, very hard thing to convince people that you are making money in it, it's going to die, you're saying. And why don't we, try to be part of the recovery? It actually never recovered. 20 years down, there's no competition there. Our revenue actually ran out from the 10, 12 million to zero. Nobody emerged to take the revenue. Basically, the sector died a very slow death.
Did you stop the business altogether, or did you?
We had investment going in to support the revenue, but we didn't invest more and more resources for growth because I didn't see any growth. But that was hard to convince. It took 2.5 years to find our way in this. It was not easy, and I am afraid the current bubble has created a similar. This is what in economics terms, if you understand Austrian economics, they would call it malinvestments. These bubbles fool us into investing in things that may not be real. That sector was not actually real in a way. There are 300 optical companies was not normal. Nobody should be investing in 300 optical companies. Maybe 10, 5 would have survived. But there were 300 actually in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley became the optical valley at that time. Now similarly, there may be 300 AI companies. There may be 500 CRM companies, right? The world does not need 500 CRM companies. That's a fact, right? But this is not something that is an easy message in a bubble. When money is free, people do this, throw money around. But then the hard part is the bust when it happens. And I am a student of history. Like I studied the Japanese bubble. See, I wasted a lot of time in grad school in Princeton. The only thing I learned from there is I was studying the Japanese bubble, which was co-terminus at that time where around 1990, the Japanese bubble burst. To give you the scale of it, real estate in Tokyo is about 60% cheaper today than it was in 1989. Most people cannot wrap their head around this. They think it will never happen. It happened in Japan. 60% cheaper than in 1989. In other words, people have not seen long-term asset value destruction like this. Japan demonstrated it. Japanese stock market today, I don't think it's higher than in 89. It's actually maybe 30-40% below. Japanese economy didn't disappear. Japan still has a $4 trillion GDP. Still, it's a rich economy, all that. But the stock market is down, what? I don't know what it is today. Maybe 40-50% down from the peak in 1989-90. These were things I was studying back in 92, 93. I had a pretty good idea that these things happen, and similar things happened in the Great Depression. Similar things happened in the Dutch bubble. And the Isaac Newton got caught in the South Sea bubble. You go back and read history. Isaac Newton was caught in a bubble, financial bubble. He in fact said that I can calculate the motions of planets, but I can never understand these bubbles. He said this. Isaac Newton himself. He lost his shirt, actually, as they say. Someone like a genius like Isaac Newton lost money in a bubble. So this is why it's very important to pay attention to this financial aspect of it, which directs investment into some sectors, and those sectors become unprofitable. Eventually a rationalization, a shakeout, all this happens. They can be very brutal. And we were in the middle of this. And this experience taught us a lot. So we diversified, we got into multiple market segments. We said we are not going to put all our eggs into one concentrated area like this. That's how, but it was a slow learning. But Tony, has been with me all through this, actually. He's very, we would discuss a lot of this. A lot of this is intellectual stimulation, right? He would read about it, we'd have a lot of debates about this. We'd spend countless hours talking about this because this is actually fundamental to our business. Even in the last 10 years, I tell you, we saw the SaaS bubble evolve. I'm going to call it the SaaS bubble now. It's obvious, right? And it evolves. We saw that companies raise $500 million, $1 billion, and they lose money in perpetuity. They have no plan to make money. How do you compete in this market, right? Those are the kinds of things that we would talk about. We have to come up with strategies. What do we do in this market? How do we navigate this? How do we navigate pre-bubble? How do we navigate post-bubble? Most people would not believe there is a post-bubble. When in the middle of a bubble, people think it's forever. The question is, how do we navigate post-bubble? So those are the kinds of things that we...
Right. So since we are slowly running out of time, I'll ask the next question, which was another interesting incident that happened. I'm told that, was it Salesforce which made an acquisition offer for Zoho at one point of time for a fairly large amount of price? I'm even told that a VC came and said that, come on, you must have some price for Zoho. Please tell us the price and we'll work out. So it's when these kind of deals come onto the table is when there is a large amount of disagreements that when somebody would want to make the money and run, somebody would want to continue the story. How did you tide over that immense urge to, not urge, actually, that wasn't that great offer on the table?
There was no great offer. They made a proposal to acquire them in the sense that they sounded us out. They were quoting us, but we all had agreed, right, unanimously. This is one area where all of us, we had other disagreements, but none of us ever wanted to take a Salesforce kind of an offer.
Okay.
That was never on the table.
It was unanimously agreed.
It was unanimously agreed back in '99.
Okay.
And that we will be building it for the long haul. That made it easy because then you don't worry about exits. You don't worry about any of it. You simply, the topic is off the table forever.
Forever. So that is what I was about to ask next. Were there any other offers that came along which wherein it was a little more tempting?
People sound us out, but you just tell them it's our stance. And Tony would make this clear, and our India, Kumar and everybody will make this clear. So we were unanimous on this, that we are not going to, an external party will not acquire this.
Man. Tony, where do you want to take Zoho in the next 10 years? I mean, as a person who have been there from day one, I mean, it's one of the most respectable software engineering companies of the entire world. You haven't taken any investment. You're kind of bootstrapped and then grow to $1 billion in revenue. And now, what next? What is your vision in terms of taking this company to the greater heights and maintain it as a value-driven organization? How do you foresee this happening?
We feel very privileged to be in this position. As I was saying earlier, I see this as a historic moment in India where we can transform the country, and we want to do our part, being in the position we are. You see that software is getting into every area, into pretty much every technology is impacted by software. And we see the opportunity to both, take our technology and our business growth into a lot of new areas, as well as build, teams and create job opportunities in many parts of the country. We see the cities as being a little oversubscribed. In fact, they are, the cost of living and the infrastructure and everything is a challenge in the cities. So Sreedhar has been very strong about pushing people into the rural areas. Sreedhar wants to go to the villages, but I guess our leadership is compromising and going to small towns, not necessarily villages. But more and more we're establishing ourselves in smaller places, as well as bringing in new technologies into the company. And we are working with a number of other teams, try to build and stitch together technologies.
So one specific question that I have is, would you like to remain a software engineering company, or will you get into more products in terms of hardware and software combined? Would you get into that sort of business, or would you like to remain a SaaS company in the next, I'm talking about the next 5-10 years, nothing beyond that?
Yeah, we're definitely getting into a number of other areas, and we are not necessarily doing it through the Zoho brand, but we are creating companies. We are investing in some companies that is a little more of helping them develop the technology in India. But there are other places where we are very closely aligned with the Zoho strategy and trying to get into those technology areas and bring software and some of our other abilities into those areas. So we, I often tell Sreedhar, we're getting into too many things, and that's thanks to Sreedhar, and he's full of ideas of things to get into. So the challenge for us will be making sure we have focused execution in all these areas. But sky's the limit in that.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays no panel discussion will be complete without this discussion. Early in 2023, we saw ChatGPT coming in, and at least all my son, daughter, everybody who's going to college is suddenly very gung-ho about it, writing assignments using ChatGPT. So it's kind of completely disrupting the entire world, if I may say so. Suddenly, like in a matter of 2-3 months, it has become very popular, very democratized. Question to you is, how do you, I mean, again, once again, my feel is that we are becoming consumers of what US has made, right? I was a consumer of Facebook, I was a consumer of Google, I was a consumer of Netflix, I was a consumer of Amazon, and now I'm a consumer of ChatGPT. So with all the AI revolutions that we keep talking about, we are still not assimilating data and building models that the world could use. I think both of you can comment on this, that in an AI journey, which is an essential journey moving forward, how do you think India should be placed? What should we be doing?
Yeah. First, I actually personally, my conviction is ChatGPT is going to have most impact on software development. Meaning, I believe we can make software development much more productive, and maybe 10 times more productive, which has implications for jobs, all of that. So we have to realize this and assimilate. In fact, right now we're preparing our company for this revolution, where how the next revolution in software development is coming, much more productive development. So what does it mean? That's one. The second, you mentioned about why India consumers. This is because we have not invested in long-term companies at all, long-term R&D at all. Our R&D investment as a percentage of GDP is very low. And I'll give some numbers. Kerala is one of the more advanced states of our country, and $3,500 per capita. Kerala has the highest talent to GDP ratio. And South Korea, about similar population, is about $40,000 per capita GDP. Taiwan is about $40,000. Israel is about $50,000. All of these are comparisons for Kerala. Israel only has about 10 million people. Kerala has about 34 million. And Taiwan is about 23 million. South Korea is about 40 plus million. So all of these have easily 10, 20 times the GDP. The talent pool is here. Kerala has the talent. Why? What does the 10x GDP look like? Long-term R&D. In other words, a ChatGPT is not an overnight phenomenon. It sounds like it. The company may be only 2-3 years old, but that's not the criteria. There's an ecosystem of companies that came before, and continuation of talent. The same people who worked in AI for 15, 20 years are in ChatGPT. And that kind of investment has to be made here. And retain the talent, work on this. That's what Zoho has really done. We retain the talent, we work on these long-term technologies, and that has to be done. Without it, I don't see a way for this 10x GDP. And our trap is the Mexico trap, which is we have a lot of factories in Mexico, but the GDP is not there because the value addition is not there. Just because we get the iPhone factory, we don't get the value addition. You have to realize on a $1,000 phone, we may get $10. In other words, we are settling for crumbs on the table. We are not competing for the value addition. In fact, I actually recently we have a startup thing coming in Tenkasi, our district. I formulated the strategy. Jeff Bezos said, your margin is my opportunity. Every district, every poor region has to ask, whose margin is my opportunity? That's what Kerala should be asking now. Whose margin? Whose margin should we go after? What is the high margin sectors we should be present? It could be medical devices, it could be AI, it could be whatever. The brain power is there. That is what will lead us to this. I don't believe it will go there in a 5-year, 7-year exit plans, all of that. I'm honest, because that's not how Silicon Valley was built. We forget that some of the companies' staying power, whether it's HP or Intel or Google staying power, that's what created that ecosystem. Not 1,000 companies that are all looking for exit, but it's the 5 companies that had the staying power that provided the fuel to those 1,000. Those 5 anchors are needed here, needed everywhere in India. That's what is important.
Thank you. I'll wind up with one last question to Tony. And you have seen, I mean, you just had a glimpse of the ecosystem. I know that you're working with some startup companies in the state. What would be your advice to the aspiring / existing entrepreneurs of the state?
Yeah, so I mentioned one of them already in that you should have a long-term view of your business. You know, you might see an occasional flash in the pan of somebody, becoming a runaway hit. But that should not be your assumption. Building a business takes time, and often the innovation and refinement in technology is where you're adding the value. It is not the idea, it is not the first implementation. It is the refinement and improvement of the technology that you have to be focused on. So whatever you do, prepare for staying power. The other thing was touched upon earlier is avoid the crowded trade, as they say, right? Avoid going into areas where you already have 500 companies, right? Look for, in the gold rush, there was a saying that the people who supplied the gold miners are the ones who made the money, right? So like that, look for opportunities to supply when there is a crowded trade rather than, getting into those same markets. Often, all the hype is around those crowded trades. So make sure you're smart about what you get into. Those would be the main things, I'd say.
Thank you. And in Kerala, there is a trend where somebody starts an STD booth, everybody starts an STD booth. Same thing with margin-free markets. So, that's a very good advice. Let's look at the blue ocean strategy, try to identify markets that has high value that we already pay for, and try and recreate some of them through long-term sustainable efforts in research and development. When I first started in Startup Mission, many people asked about why Kerala does not have a unicorn. And my answer was, let's try and stay away from that word all by itself, because what we really want to do is long-term sustainable businesses which will create jobs and wealth. That is what we want to do. We want to elevate the life of the people altogether through entrepreneurship, and there is no better example than Zoho in doing that. And I would like to thank both of you, and Tony, it has been a pleasure to finally meet you, and it's a pride that we have somebody from Kerala also as part of the Zoho journey. Thank you so much for being here today and spending your valuable time with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.